record, and we should be all set to go. So I'm passing it over to you, Bernard.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Bernard Green. I'm chairing this town school partnership meeting of May the 22nd, 2025. So let's get started. We have let's make sure we have a quorum and call the roll. Charlie, do you mind doing that? I don't really have a good picture of who's on.
Yeah, I can do that. You want to, are we doing the minutes? Is that what you're?
No. Call
roll call. Sure. We'll start with the advisory committee members that are here. So, Cliff Brown.
Here.
Okay. And Dennis is not here. Harry, are you here able to participate in his stead?
Yes, I'm participating in his stead until he shows up, or unless he can't make it at all.
Thank you. Mariah Obrega.
Sorry, this is just that we're here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
taking
Okay.
roll. Yeah, it's not
Very
on
good.
it's not on the agenda, but we're taking roll.
Yeah, we're supposed to do it this way, so I'm sorry that it's a pain in the neck.
And then Valerie Freese.
Here.
Thank you. And then we don't have, I guess we could say Michael Salmon.
I'm here, but recognizing that I should not be
Non-voting
voting on
member. Thank you.
substance.
And Chair Green.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, first item is the minutes of 4/28/25. Does anyone have any edits to those minutes for corrections? Clarifications? Hearing none, I move approval of the minutes of April 28th, 2025. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Cliff Brown?
Oh, you wanted
Sure. Go ahead, Bernard. Sorry.
I wrote down the name, so
Thank you. So I didn't mean to take your thunder there. Steal your thunder.
Cliff Brown,
Aye.
Harry Friedman,
Abstain.
okay, Mariah Obrega. Mariah,
Abstain, I wasn't present.
okay, Valerie Frias,
Abstain. I also wasn't present.
and Chair voted yes. How should we deal with Mike Sandman? He was at the last meeting. Do you approve the last meeting minutes, Mike? And if it's
Yes,
not legal, we'll just excise the minutes or something.
as
Okay.
long as they don't go to jail.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's start off with, we have two things on the agenda, and we have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, as I understand, for the school committee members. And I also have to get out at 5. Those two items are the 2026 budget, particularly a couple, or at least one budget amendment. And secondly, a school department financial review by Clifton, Lawrence, and Allen, which will take up the majority of this meeting. Chaz, or Melissa, do you want to start off with the budget?
Melissa, you want to start?
Sure. I think most people are familiar since most bodies have taken motions on these adjustments already. Since the last vote on the budget that was in the combined reports, we had 2 additional adjustments. The first was recognizing the savings that the school department is receiving from the staffing changes that resulted in group health savings. And then the second was an adjustment for the school food services revolving fund. Those changes were voted on by both the select board and the advisory committee. The revised school appropriation is $142,792,591. I've given that number to Susan. I believe she might be queuing that up for the school committee to vote later on today.
We voted at finance to recommend it last night for voting tonight. Yeah.
Great. And all of the combined reports and supplements are up on the town meeting website. So all of that information is there. And we were anticipating a potential amendment around the school budget that did not get filed. So we're not anticipating any other changes. We are still debating on the town side. DPW, there is an amendment for that. But in terms of the school appropriation, that is the number that we're going with for town meeting.
Okay, any questions there? None? Any discussion? Okay, let's move on. School department financial review. Is that going to be you, Chaz?
Yeah, I'll speak at the outset, and then I want to give the members the opportunity. So last Friday, we received the final version of this report from CLA, who we had engaged, you may remember, on a expedited basis to try and deal with this before town meeting. It was critical in the mind of the bodies that we get something to ensure confidence for town meeting voters that the explanation for what at the time was both an FY25 budget gap and an FY26 budget gap could be addressed, and people could have confidence in what they were voting on. So that report was published Tuesday to the public. It contains a number of findings, issues identified over the course of the 8 weeks, a little over 8 weeks that they were involved with the schools. There's a covering chart that tries to summarize that and map it onto the questions that we asked them, so that folks have sort of a plain language understanding of what CLA found and didn't find. I think the salient takeaways include the fact that, one, there have been significant improvements between FY25 and FY26, which I think are really important to highlight and ensure for the confidence of folks that you can see, for example, just in the opening findings, the difference between what was available to the team putting together the budget in FY25 and FY26 is enormous, and that has resulted in better, cleaner projections and more realistic numbers for some of these costs, which is critical as we try and figure out the longer term issues. So I do want to just highlight that, because I think, unfortunately, whenever a report like this comes out, people focus on the negative, and it really is important, I think, too, to focus on the positive, and make sure that folks understand that there are positive findings in this report that we need to take heart in and be encouraged by and move forward on in that regard. The other kind of categories of findings involve processes. I would say processes that either did not exist or were in the process of coming together, or processes that existed but were not followed, or not and consequences for which that were not enforced. And you could see that in some of the issues involving a variety of services provided. And then there are some issues involving, interpersonal conflict, issues where, it's organizational issues that have been highlighted, where the recommendation really was to undertake a more searching sort of HR assessment, and follow up on that front, so that the schools have a better sense there and can have the framework of a better HR environment going forward. I do just want to flag, and I know others will want to echo this, which is one of the issues that's raised in this. There are two, what's causing, what are the drivers of cost? And the drivers of cost are exactly what the school committee and the school administration has been saying, which is salaries and benefits, and some of the costs of education outstripping our revenues. That's it, right? That's what underpins all of this. So while we're talking about obviously trying to improve policies and procedures and doing better on this HR and interpersonal front, at the end of the day, the deficit underlying this is structural. And so I think it's critical for us, as we think about how to move forward on this, that we keep that in mind, that we don't lose sight of that in some of these other discussions. I think the town meeting member, Michael McGraw-Hertzig, I think, came to the select board and offered a very, I think, compelling framework for how to think about this, which is, let's not get bogged down in blame. Let's think about this in terms of forward progress and betterment rather than recrimination, so that we can be good. We can move forward on a positive footing and try and be solution oriented as opposed to getting mired in this stuff, because that structural deficit is what underpins a lot of this. The other, and one of the aspects of that structural deficit that I know has caused a lot of concern in the community that I think is worth repeating on a regular basis is the point that's made that the cost of special education is rising. And I just want to be very clear to the community, as I know the school committee has been, which is if a child has an individualized education program, child has needs that are on an IEP or that have been identified, the school district must meet those needs. It is not optional, and it must meet them in accordance with federal and state law. So special education is not something that we cut corners on or can do any, treat in that regard. So I think it's very important, especially given the vulnerability of the population that we serve, that we not treat special education as just another budget line item, but that we look at this in the context of the requirements that we have under federal and state law, which is to provide a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment for our students and make sure that that is done appropriately. So when I got a letter from the co-chairs of Brookline CPAC, which I think was very helpful, talking about, how the framing of these issues, I think it's just important that we continue to focus on that. The mandates are that we provide these educational services as soon as possible without delay. All of that is true. What we can't do is provide these services without Cori checks, right? That's the tension that this report identifies. So we do need to come up with a process that provides special education services appropriately and quickly, but does not cut those corners and put people who have not been through a criminal background check in contact with a vulnerable population. So that's the balance that has to be struck there. The other issue that they raise is in regard to special education, the issues about recommendations of the IEP team and things going beyond that. I want to be, and I think they do a really good job of outlining the IEP process, which is a collaborative process between the parents, the school, the evaluators to determine what a student's needs are. And in some cases, the parents and the other members of the IEP team don't agree on what a need is, and as a result, they are the district may settle. They may enter into litigation or they may settle, and there are any number of reasons why a district may settle on that front. So I don't think what the report is saying, and what I think those folks are worried that it's saying, is that settlements are bad and we shouldn't do them. That's not what the report is saying. The allegation being made here is more limited, I believe, when reading it, and more direct, which is there's an allegation that individuals who work for the schools believe that an IEP is sound and are being told, nevertheless, to provide other services. That's what the allegation is. And so that just needs to be investigated. So it's not an indictment of services, nor is it an indictment of settlements. So I think that it was what needs to be investigated in that regard. So those are the issues that were identified in this letter. I want to thank the folks who put it together, because I think it is very important to not leap to conclusions on special education issues, which are very significant and require us to provide free and appropriate public education. I'm sorry, Mariah, I'm going on here, but I want to just toward the just say in terms of next steps. Unfortunately, Susan Givens has another commitment and can't be here this evening. In terms of next steps, I really want her to be present before we talk about the structure of any sort of agreement between town, schools, and advisory committee going forward. This is just an opportunity for folks to talk about the report, talk about what they see and don't see, and hopefully move forward on that front. So that, but after town meeting, after we get through the town meeting season, we can have those discussions, hopefully with Susan present, with interim leadership in place soon thereafter, and kind of work through those issues. So I don't want to try and talk through any of those things without Susan Gibbons present. So
Before we go to Mariah, I noticed that the email from CPAC, understandably, was not sent to the advisory committee. So I'll forward that, or can you forward that to the advisory committee members, Chess?
sure.
Okay. It was sent to Sam Mintz, but not to the advisory committee, whatever that means. Anyway, I'm sorry. Mariah?
Thanks. I have some comments about the report too. Before I get into them, I just want to say thank you particularly to Chaz for your highlighting of how important our obligations are to special education and really, acknowledging and thanking the CPAC co-chairs for sending that letter, which is really important. And I'm just really grateful to you for really emphasizing that, because I think, as you said, this is not only a legal obligation, but I'll add to that, it's a moral obligation to support children who are most vulnerable. So I very much appreciate you calling that out. And I also appreciate you mentioning that Susan couldn't be here, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves without Susan being present, who's a key member of the team and really the linchpin to this whole operation. And so how we proceed is really important to have her engaged. And of course, she would have been here if she could, but it was very much an obligation she could not get out of. So I just want to say thank you for those comments. And I'm looking forward to sort of next steps, but I did take the time to write down some reflections on the material we got. And so if it's okay with people, I would like to read my comments. It might take a couple of minutes, but and I'm happy to share them in writing afterwards, but I just would appreciate that. So thank you. So I have reviewed the town administrator's memo, the report from CLA, and the matrix table connecting their recommendations to the original questions provided by the town and PSB. So these comments reflect on those materials. Originally, my hope in speaking with Audit Committee Chair Paul Healy about the potential for a review was that we would get clarity on what went wrong and how to fix it so that we could rebuild trust. Trust with the community was broken. My own trust with PSB had been broken with the allegations. As a member of the school committee and the finance chair, I have an insider's view and a sense of where the truth lies, but the unreconcilable reports coming from OSS and OAF required a third party to review primary materials and determine facts for everyone's sake. And I do see some very important recommendations that I believe are new, or if they are not new, they have not been fully considered by key stakeholders in the past. For example, I've got 3 that I think are exciting. So updating Munis to have the needed modules and to have it be customized for PSB and school finance needs. This has been something I've heard before from PSB staff, and I think it needs to be done. I think I've heard, I don't know if this is true, that it may not have been implemented originally due to the additional extra costs of the implementation, but I think this report makes clear that it's past time that it be done. The revolving fund balances. This is something that the finance subcommittee has requested for years. It's come up at multiple meetings. Just to understand from our perspective, as the balances fluctuate, what is the appropriate balance? What is a good minimum? What's a good maximum? Where are we trying? What are we aiming for in these? And staff has this year, we've been under Susan's leadership on a multi-year financial cleanup process, and staff this year has told us that they've been focused on closing out prior year grant accounts, and we've seen that happening. But they've also told us that the work around revolving funds would happen for us in the near future, because it is important to manage those accounts closely. A new recommendation, at least to me, was to have implications for not following policies. For example, the report recommends having cybersecurity training be a mandatory condition of employment, and I believe it's not currently a mandatory condition. I could be wrong. I know we have a policy on confidentiality, but again, I'm not sure it's a condition of employment to adhere to it. I don't know what the consequences are for not adhering. And I think there could have been greater internal controls, and what could have happened could have been eradicated more quickly if there were true consequences as suggested. I think the execution is less simple than it might appear from the report, but nonetheless, I think it's a great step in the right direction. So I think these are great benefits, but I also have some concerns that I'm just going to articulate. First, the report does not answer some of the key questions that were asked. For example, in response to, I believe this was maybe Mike Sandman who suggested this question, how do PSB's financial or management practices compare to best practices for Massachusetts school districts. If PSB practices depart from these best practices, what recommendations would you make to correct them? And the answer was, answers to this question and the recommendations for resolving it are contained in the responses to the other 6 questions. That's not an answer to the question. We didn't hear the best practices for Massachusetts school districts, and I think we need to understand the actual answer to the question. In response to, are there material expenditures that were inappropriately or inaccurately charged to a particular PSB office during FY 24 or 25 that should have been charged to a different office or department's budget? And if so, were such charges the result of error, intention, or policies or procedures governing allocation of costs across units? The answer was a disagreement on whether certain expenses were eligible for a recurring federal grant resulted in a delay in receiving that grant and ran the risk of losing it altogether. That does not answer the question. And as I've said at a prior TSP meeting, the question was specifically articulated because the former deputy for OSS, in a response to a question from me and in my school committee role about the year-on-year growth on special education costs, she alleged that OAF were charging other expenses to OSS accounts. So the question was not answered, and we need to get the answer to this question. And I think Brookline deserves the questions to all of the answers to all of the questions that were laid out. Second, I think we would have gotten better answers and probably an overall better report if, as I understand, PSB staff had requested, they had been given the opportunity to correct factual issues. I'll just give one example. My understanding is that the $1.1 million quote unquote Excel error was not an error, but it was tracked elsewhere in the spreadsheet. But that seems to have persisted into the final report. So allowing, if there's other factual errors in that one to persist, it actually breaks down trust with the community and trust with the staff and the board members who participated in this process. So I think that we really need to be able to close that loop. Third, I think we could have gotten a tighter report if we can have a little bit of some back and forth. So for example, some questions I have 3. Point in time analysis of the revolving funds that was presented may not make the most sense given the financial flows and delays in posting revenues to the accounts that has occurred over recent years. Can you explain your choice of point in time? Additionally, the only fund with any meaningful increase in funds is the BEEP revolving fund, and that accounts for about 75% of the non-school lunch increase in revolving funds. Was the reason for that increase explored? Second question. The report says that the school committee should ensure its administrators provide it with the information needed to make programmatic and budgetary decisions. How would we ensure that administrators are not misrepresenting facts to us and their colleagues, as happened this past year? Third, the report includes, and this is a quote, allegations that special education services were given to students beyond what the data or the student's IEP required due to management or governance intervention. Were those allegations substantiated? So I would like to request, and possibly this is part of the process you've alluded to, Chaz, that we have opportunity to meet with CLA or to submit follow-up questions for response from members of this body and from other key stakeholders. Fourth, and I'm getting close to the end, I apologize for how long this is, but I had a lot of thoughts. Fourth, I also think it's unfortunate that it was not explicitly stated that the primary cause of the PSB issues apparently stems from the former OSS deputy not following internal controls and apparently directing her office to do the same. This is alluded to but not clearly stated. For example, the report says that the OAF deputy did not sign the contracts. It is not made clear why. My understanding is it's not because she did not choose to sign, it's because her signature block was removed from the contract and then the contract was sent out with one signature. And this was from OSS. The report says, we recommended that there be a designated senior management level employee responsible for overseeing the enforcement of this policy and taking disciplinary action when necessary. It's left unsaid that the former deputy was responsible for this and they themselves subverted the policy. The report says, while there are documented internal control policies addressing the above finding, they were not followed by previous employees. It's not said that those employees are not in OAF, and under new leadership, OSS is now following these protocols. And the report says that since this information regarding settlements was not included in reports being provided to school committee, they did not have all the information needed to make the best informed decision, but it doesn't say that the former deputy of OSS provided incorrect information and overrode correct information being provided to us. I'm almost done. So these are just a few examples of not naming the problem, which was a senior manager who who is not performing her responsibility to the district in critical and devastating ways. And last, I'm also concerned about allegations being included in the report alongside facts. I asked an earlier question about the allegations that services were provided to students. And I'm not going to read that whole quote again, but if those are not substantiated, then this report is perpetuating a cycle of unsubstantiated allegations that got us here to this low trust environment in the first place. In conclusion, I hope that this body can have a discussion about three things: whether we can explore the report further with CLA, how to implement these initiatives, and whether there is work that can be done in partnership to do so. For example, Munis, like, are there changes on the town side that they'd also like to see? Is there an opportunity to achieve economies of scale in any Munis improvements? The whistleblower hotline, should it be established for both town and school, given that the town has also had some issues in the past that might have benefited from such a resource? And where would the funds for these types of improvements or modifications come from? So thank you for listening to this long talk, but I just wanted to get those thoughts out, and I really do hope that we can work together to address some of the concerns and the opportunities that I've raised here.
Okay, thank you, Mariah.
Thank
Make sure
you.
that you circulate that to the committee of TSP. Harry?
Thank you, Bernard. So I have a question and a comment. My question is, what exactly is CPAC, the sender of a letter that none of us on advisory got?
Well, I mean, well, Mariah, why don't you explain what CPAC
Sure,
is? I mean,
CPAC is the
it's a school
special
wait, hold on. School organization, and it wouldn't be within their sort of understanding to send it to the advisory committee. I mean,
I'm not criticizing. I'm just for those of us on advisory who are sitting in the audience going, what is that? I'm just looking for an answer.
So it's the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. It's a body that's established by Massachusetts law to advise the district on special education concerns.
Thank you.
Yep.
So my comment is, I thought overall the report was good. I thought it brought up a number of issues that needed raising, and I thought they did a good job. I think that's with the caveat that it's not a be-all and end-all report. We didn't pay them for a be-all and end-all report, and we didn't give them enough time for a be-all and end-all report. I think what they did do was good, although I recognize the critiques that Mariah made and think they're legit. There were areas where I had wished that the CLA people had gone into greater depth. One of them, I think, is on sort of watchdogs over all the processes they mentioned. You know, how should watchdogs or others have reacted? And you know, are there guardrails? I think they could have gone into that a little bit more, and I wish they had. But from my perspective, the team at CLA that worked with them, with whom I met a number of times, seemed to be on top of their game. And again, I think given the time and given how much we monetarily invested in this, I thought it was overall a good report. Thank you.
great. Yeah, and I think maybe Chad said that, you know, this is at least a starting point. Didn't expect to, you know, get a final.
And yes, I think to Mariah's question, after town meeting, we're happy to invite CLA back. You know, as part of this, we signed, you know, as with any consulting firm, right? You sign a master scope and then you sign a specific scope of work for this project. Their work on this project has concluded, but we can definitely talk with them about what follow-ons look like and how we might want to engage either them or someone else. I think to both Harry and Mariah's points about, you know, identifying the source of the problems, I think because it's an accounting firm and not a human resources firm, they shied away from that. You may recall that North Andover actually conducted two reports. They conducted a report on the finances and they conducted a report on the people. And they had those separated out for a reason and did them with different folks. Our concern for time was that we wanted to get, again, something before the FY26 budget. And really at the time, thinking that we were in trouble for FY25 and we would need to make cuts in advance of town meeting. which is why we ultimately decided to try and go with one report. And I think you see that here with CLA saying, you know, an HR, an analysis that's more focused on human resources and the issues that Mariah raised is necessary and something that we can discuss further. But yes, I will certainly invite them back.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
So I share Harry's reaction that I thought the report was, given the time constraints involved, a good report. And I saw three things that came out of it that, or confirmed three things. One was a need for more clarity around what the norms and standards are for process and best practices, which should be relatively easy to implement. The second being this question about the cultural problems within the school, the administration, and that's something that I think is going to take quite some time to fix. Actually, I don't think it's going to be an easy change, and I think that from our discussions with CLA, it seemed like that had gone on for a while. It wasn't like this was just a 1 or 2 year thing, and it actually may have predated some of the people that are there now or have just recently left. And then the last thing, which Chaz referred to, was the structural problem for the school, and that with salaries and salaries, benefits, special education costs going up, where's that gap going to come from? And that strikes me as being a pretty significant and substantial problem that needs to get resolved, and maybe is also a longer term issue.
Paul, what were your three? There was
The first one was greater clarity around what are processes, procedures, norms, and standards that we have to do. So the idea that you have to respond within 2 days, the idea that you don't have to do a CORI report, or just a number of things that should be pretty clear, just needs more clarity around what are our standards and norms that people need to follow. The second was how to repair the damage, the cultural and mistrust within the school administration, and the third being how to solve the structural problems that seem to be there in funding schools, given the costs of the salaries and benefits and special education, and given our revenue stream. How do we bring those two together? And that also strikes me as being a pretty challenging long-term issue.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? It's only 4:37. Anything that anyone in the administration wants to add? I see Dr. Guillory is here. Valerie Frias, no, she's on the school committee. No.
Thanks, Bernard, for the invite. Just again, want to thank CLA as well as the district staff for their participation and engagement, as well as the improvements, as Chaz noted, that have already been underway, and that the group is committed to long-term and systemic improvement. So thank you all for your participation and support as well.
Thank you. Okay, look, if no one has any further discussion, we might as well end the meeting.
I will just say to folks, please watch your emails for Charlie's polls. It's this group is uniquely hard to get together, which is okay. It is what it is. But let's really try and find times that work for everyone so that we can get a meeting on the books as soon as possible after town meeting.
Okay, Mariah has her hand raised, but also Chaz, I said this before, but make sure that the CPAC letter gets circulated to the advisory committee.
We will, yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a plug in for scheduling these meetings like regularly at a set time, and canceling them if we don't have agenda items, but because of your point, Chaz, let's find a time and just block it off so we don't have this craziness of scheduling every time.
I think that's right, especially given the work that needs to be done. It's gonna take a more sustained effort as opposed to being kind of an ad hoc meeting process. So we will work on that.
Thank you. But I would just add that every year it's not ad hoc because every year we go through the budget cycle and it's all sort of predictable.
No, I know, which is why it shouldn't be ad hoc. It didn't used to be ad hoc. It used to be quarterly, then it was monthly for a while, and then it was whenever the issues came up. And now it should go back to being regular.
Thank you.
Yeah, at the same time, we have the Expenditure and Revenue Committee. So it's gonna be hard to find time that doesn't conflict with a lot of people's other responsibilities, but we'll do it. We'll do it. Anything else? Okay, let's end the meeting. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.